How's everybody doing this morning? This is L.A. Kendrick with another tale from the vault of Would You Dare, supernatural, extraterrestrial, cryptids, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, extra-dimensional, ultra-dimensional, UAPs. I think I said all of that. But I'm trying to make sure that I get it all out there. As you can see, witches, monsters, ghosts, lizard man, dog man, you name it, we talk about it here. We're talking about government conspiracy, things along those lines. And I keep trying. I know I keep telling you guys that I'm going to get you the footage that I had when I went to Area 51. And I do apologize because I need to get that for you guys to see. Pretty impressive. Now, but what keeps happening is more stories keep popping up about aliens in the mall, aliens in Peru that are attacking people, the fAcE stealers, which is what I'm going to discuss today, part 2. The Las Vegas situation with the alien in the backyard, the UAP, the jellyfish, and the jellyfish video from Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp when they went into the water in Iraq in 2017, right around that time. And you guys, something is going on, even if you don't think something's going on, because this is just creepy and weird how all of it's coming out right now, all of a sudden. I mean, it's been out, but what it is, the government can no longer really deny it because there's so much evidence and there's so many whistleblowers coming out. But still, you got to kind of watch the whistleblowers and judge what you see with your own 2 eyes and your own common sense. So take this with a grain of salt, this information that you have here. Process it however you want. I got that new book coming out, The Benefits of a Bully, Rape War. Do not let the title fool you. It's not about glorifying bullies. It's about how bullies can benefit you and get you on the right path, or things along those lines. So it's coming out real soon here. But in the meantime, between time, you guys know how we do it. I don't want to take up too much of your time. And I've timestamped this information. And again, educational purposes only. Educational and entertainment purposes only. YouTube, fair use. So, and I don't want to take any, credit away from me that does not deserve. But got to get these stories out to you guys. So, y'all know how we do. The party don't start till you walk in. And now that you're here, let's begin. So let's go ahead and touch on and get started. Again, I'm going to timestamp and time skip some of the information because that's the best way to do it. That way, I don't bore you to death, and I'm not going to talk through or try to talk over top of people while they're explaining the situation. I'm going to let them do the talking. So we're starting off with the event. The guy went back to the UFO event in Peru, and his name is Timothy Alvarino, and this is redacted. Another good show you guys should jump into, along with Weaponized.
And as you said, I went up the river, and it was a 2-day journey to the village of San Antonio de Pintuyacu.
So after this 2-day journey, you get there, you meet with the villagers, and they take you into the jungle to recount what unfolded that night. And so the initial reports were that these were some sort of large creatures wearing a body armor with elongated heads. I think the initial reports were that this looked a lot like the Green Goblin from the first Spider-Man movie, the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie. And you spoke to multiple villagers, and what did they tell you about their experience?
Well, we heard stories from, as you said, multiple, but many villagers actually, and they told us that their village was being assaulted for about a month-long period by very strange assailants. These assailants were dressed in black armored bodysuits from head to foot. They had elongated helmets with almond-shaped yellow or green-tinted eyelenses. They had backpacks, but they don't appear to be jetpacks. Perhaps their batteries are small reactors or something, because these guys would enter the village. Actually, they would be flying over the village when they would make their initial incursion. The villagers would see them flying over the village, and they would see these discs, these almost like little flying saucers in the sky.
That's the alien? That little green hue? That's what they're saying is the alien. Sorry about that.
came to the village, concluded that these aliens were simply local.
And they had to go because there was an attempted abduction.
So
Assailants, these assailants were in the sky above their village, and then they would see them go and land amongst the trees or behind the trees in the jungle, or in the clearings in the jungle. And then these assailants would walk or float into the village. And I say float because several of the men in the village told me that when they encountered these guys, these assailants, they weren't walking, they were floating. They have very strange footwear. They have these two discs on the bottom of their shoes. Each shoe has two discs, and apparently whatever sort of technology, whatever sort of technological apparatus is on the bottom of their shoes, it enables them to float. And all of the encounters with these assailants are at nighttime. And the villagers, as I said, a couple of the guys, they shot at these assailants point blank range. In fact, one guy was very close. He was about 10 feet away. He discharged his 16 gauge shotgun at one of these assailants, and he knocked him back on his butt because he was floating. And he wanted to make it clear to me he was floating. I shot him, he fell back on his butt, the shotgun blast knocked him on his butt, but he just popped back up and resumed floating, and then sort of moved away. And this is why the villagers were comparing these guys to the Green Goblin from Spider-Man, and also because they actually, as I said earlier, they would see these saucers in the sky. They would have a series of lights around the perimeter. They also had floodlights on them, and the assailants were actually surfing on these saucers. So this was their mode of transportation when they would come into the village. And these seem to be circular.
Time skip. You time skip it, fellas and ladies. So they're going to debunk the police information because the cops were saying some crazy stuff. So, you know how they do. They try to cover for stuff that makes no sense.
Boards that they have. They also are in possession of what can only be described as advanced aerospace vehicles.
Pretty advanced for some remote village miners to have this kind of expensive advanced technology.
It's preposterous. In fact, we can rule out river miners. We can rule out. We can also rule out drug traffickers, narcos, because many of the villagers described, they even drew in the dirt for me, these advanced aerospace vehicles that have the capability to hover silently over the village. When I say advanced aerospace vehicles, I'm talking about like UFO type craft here. They hover silently over the village. They're about the size of a small, like a private jet or a large helicopter. They're acorn shaped, like an acorn on its side, not like a bell shape, an acorn on its side. And they sort of come to a point in the front and then they round off at the back of the craft. One individual drew the craft for me on an acrylic board. He was pulling his nets up at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was pitch black, and then all of a sudden he said it was like somebody turned the lights on. It was like the sun came up. He said everything was lit up around him. He was looking down in the water. He saw this reflection in the water, so he looks up, and about 30 or 40 feet above his head, he sees this craft, this acorn-shaped craft hovering silently above him, and it's transparent. He said it had like a transparent mesh. The fuselage was made like out of a transparent mesh, something like that. And he could actually see two guys inside of it. One was sort of in the cockpit area, one was in the middle. It had these rounded nubs for wings, so it didn't have wings. It was completely silent, and these nubs, they open up, and they deploy a series of rapidly blinking lights as if it's scanning. And he's not the only one in the village who described that very thing to me. There's numerous people in the village saw this same craft hovering above the village on numerous occasions, and in their case it wasn't transparent. In his it was transparent. So obviously, and by the way, I made the point to say that there's a government communications outpost in the village. That's important because the villagers have internet there's a satellite uplink in the village, and they go in in what they call the Tambo, which is the building that belongs to the provincial government that they built.
Time skip.
With the
Experiencing this isn't one event and they're done, right? They've been coming and coming and coming.
And not just this village, multiple villages in Alto Nanay have been attacked, and some of them have been hit with lasers. But by the same assailants wearing these black armored bodysuits. They've all seen the craft. A lot of them have seen the craft I just described, this advanced aerospace vehicle. So the initial reporting, first in the Peruvian press, and then the American press picked it up and ran with it. Even I forget the name of the one, The Nation or whatever it is. They were saying that these are river miners with jetpacks, and the purpose of these incursions is to drive the villagers out of this remote village so that they can operate in the region, so that they can mine in the river. Hogwash. We know that that is not true. How do we know? Because the attacks that happened in these remote villages, these villages have, anywhere from 50 to 200 people. San Antonio Pintuyacu has about 200 inhabitants. It's a larger village, 200 inhabitants. But they did not just happen in these remote villages. The incursions also happened in the village, in the city of Nauta, and also on the outskirts of Iquitos. Now you have to understand, Nauta, which is a 2-hour drive, about an hour and a half, 2-hour drive from Iquitos. It's the only place you can drive, by the way, from Iquitos. Iquitos is the main city in that department in the Amazon, in that state, let's call it, in the Amazon. You can only get to Iquitos by boat or airplane. There are no roads that go there. One of the most remote cities in the world. From Iquitos, the only place you can get to by road is Nauta. Nauta has a population of 35,000 inhabitants. Okay, it's got a military base, it's got a Navy base, Army base, and it's got a well-equipped police force. So now we're not dealing anymore with a remote village whose villagers are equipped with shotguns held together with rope like in San Antonio de Pintuyacu. Now we're dealing with a city, 35,000 inhabitants, with an Army and Navy base that can deploy helicopters, automatic weapons, and the same incursions happened in Nauta.
Were there any military responses to this? Was there any radar signatures, anything like that you've been able to uncover that military members have come forward and confirmed or that they were able to track?
No, I met with one of the most famous admirals in Peru, and a couple of Navy guys who are very well connected, and I talked to them. I wanted to get their thoughts on what's been unfolding in the Peruvian Amazon, and basically, they're very dismissive. Everyone is dismissive except for the people.
Imagine that. Let me time skip. Let me see what this is on. Let me touch on this. Let me just see.
For the purposes of organ harvesting. And so my mind goes to that. Now I know that sounds it's hard to swallow for a lot of people that there would be groups doing this, but when you follow the money and you realize it's a multi-billion-dollar a year industry, nearly $1 trillion a year industry, and you follow the money and you realize that individuals and organizations, we know the organ harvesting that's been happening in Ukraine, we know that it's been happening in other parts of the world, and everywhere there's like chaos and natural disasters, you find this scenario happening. And so in a remote village of Peru, where they could be testing some of these, I know I'm making big leaps here, but this is where my mind goes here. They could be testing some sort of a technology on unwitting Peruvian villagers for the purposes of testing and utilizing this. I don't know. Talk about this part of it, because if it's not miners, it's not military, then what else is it?
Well, you're voicing my thoughts as well here.
Let me time skip again. That's not something that, we understand. So I wanted to touch on that briefly. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna time skip it up. Let's get it.
If I have a feeling, and this is just a postulation, but I think that this group, whoever these people are using the pelacata, the face peeler legend, as cover for something else. I feel like they want everyone to think that they're the face peelers, when in fact there's something else going on that's what they're hiding. Whatever they're really doing, they're using the face peeler legend and the fear as cover for something else that's happening. there in the jungle. And the phenomenon is spreading, by the way. It started up in Alto Nanay in Loreto, in the state of Loreto. But also, I've talked to people now from Yurimaguas, which is southwest of that region, and I talked to a particular individual named Pablo Bardales, who saw the same assailants in his village. He was bathing in the river, and he started hearing people yelling and screaming because they started to see these assailants. Same exact description, head to toe, black armored bodysuits, right, flying on these circular hoverboards. He comes running out of the river. He throws a towel on. He grabs his gun and a flashlight, and he begins to pursue these guys into the jungle. He's running right behind him, he told me. He discharges his shotgun at one of them. And by the way, they hear when these guys shoot when they discharge their shotguns, they hear the BBs of the bird shot bouncing off, dinging off of body armor. Many of these guys told me that. But he seems to have damaged the technology that these guys are using, because after he shot the guy was attempting to lift off into the air. The assailant is trying to lift off into the air, and he seems to be having some problems. And so Pablo drops his shotgun, runs up to him, and grabs him by the waist to try and tackle him. And he's holding on to the guy as the guy is sort of shooting up into the air. He's holding on to him. And this guy pulls out, he said it was like a little flashlight, but he said it was a laser. He pulled some sort of a device out, and he hit Pablo with a laser. And Pablo instantly went unconscious. As soon as he got hit with this laser, went unconscious. He woke up later. His dad came, and his dad and his friends in the village, they all saw these guys. So they found him laying there in the jungle, and he sustained some heart problems that he's still dealing with to this day after being hit with that laser. And this has been the story in multiple villages. So San Antonio de Pintuyacu was just the first. That's the first village where the footage came out and it hit the social media and went viral. But it's happened in perhaps dozens of other villages.
Now, when you went there, you brought some special equipment and donations that you were able to bring, not only food and food supplies for the village, but you also brought technology and some, I think, thermal imaging cameras, special cameras that they could try to capture these things on film.
That's right.
While you were there, how long were you there, and did you see anything, hear anything in your investigation?
Well, we did provision the village because they were living in such a state of terror that they were no longer going out to their chakras, their little farms around the village. The men were staying up all night, so they were running out of supplies. So we decided, Doug Thornton and I decided to provision them with food and medical supplies, and then some strategic technology. And I want to thank the gentleman from Conduit Church, Pastor Darren Tyler, my friend Jamie Brandenburg, and the guys at Conduit Church who helped me co-fund this expedition so that we could provision the village, help them out with the food and medical supplies. The technology we brought them was designed, we specifically picked, acquisitioned this technology to help them with their patrols. We brought them a thermal binocular, we brought them high-powered flashlights, radios, and night vision goggles with recording capabilities. And we taught them how to use all this technology. Doug, who's ex-infantry Marine, and I brought a couple of Peruvian jungle warfare Navy guys with me, active duty, and they taught the villagers how to patrol in a column. And we divided the village up into 6 sectors that correspond to the radios, and taught these guys to patrol their village in more of a professional way. And they were deploying this technology, and it was really, really quite remarkable. So the point is, we wanted to equip them with technology to defend themselves, but also to film the phenomena should it happen again. It has not. So thankfully, there have been no further incursions into the village of San Antonio.
Time skip. So let me guess. The aliens understand what's happening, so maybe that's why there hasn't been any more incursions in the villages. Could that be it? let me let Talia tell her story. Trying to make sure that I'm doing this as quick as I can possibly do it and not bore you guys, you know. So let me see.
Is one of the most graphic accounts, and she had a very close encounter with these assailants. And according to Talia, they grabbed her. And by the way, as I said before, they only attack after sundown. They only come, you know, in the cloak of night, under the cloak of night. And so two of these assailants grabbed her one night. She was alone in her backyard and picking fruit from a tree. And she has many interesting details. For example, her encounter began when this fruit fell out of the tree. She bends over to pick it up, and she felt a gentle wind, a gentle breeze behind her, and she noticed the leaves were rustling. And so when she looked behind to see what was causing this breeze, she saw one of these assailants flying up to her on one of these discs. He was surfing on it. He flew up right next to her, landed right next to her, and grabbed her from behind. He put his hand over her mouth. And then she saw another one coming up. So there's like a gully, and this is in the middle of the village. There's houses all around, and there's this, in between these houses is sort of this forested gully. There's jungle, there's a thatch roofed chicken coop down there. They came up through the woods, so they're maneuvering between the trees. They came up through the woods, they grabbed her, and they dragged her behind the chicken coop, and then they proceeded to smear her face with this cream. First they mixed the cream with a powder in their hand, and they sucked it up in a nasal syringe and shot it up her nose. That's the first thing they did. And then they took out like she described it, like a large toothpaste container. This was a different cream that they took and smeared all over her face, and that instantly made her face go numb. And she says, she's the only one, this is sort of an anomaly, but she's the only one who says she heard them speaking. She called, they were both very large. She said the smaller one was my height, the larger one was taller than me, these two guys. She called the larger guy the gringo. And the reason why she calls him the gringo is because she says she heard him speaking, and they were speaking Spanish, but the gringo spoke with a broken accent, like a gringo accent. And the other guy she referred to as like the Peruvian, because he spoke like Peruvian Spanish without an accent. And so she heard them talking. In fact, she says that when they began this, the gringo was smearing the cream on her face. The let's call him the Peruvian face peeler, said to the gringo face peeler, "Be careful, don't put too much on her face because it's going to ruin the flesh." And I asked her, what do you think they meant by that? She said it was something about how it was going to cause the skin to stick to the flesh, to the tissue beneath, and it was going to make it more difficult to cut her face off. And indeed, they proceeded to take out what I think is a laser syringe, a small device, and they began to cut her neck right under her jawline. They made 2 incisions because she started to struggle. In fact, she was able to get her hand behind her head, and she started to push up on one of the masks of the guy behind her, and the face peeler in front of her slapped her in the face. And in the midst of this struggle, they dropped her, and she was able to scream. Now, the village had already been in a state of vigilance because this was not the first incursion. So all the guys are sitting on their porches with their shotguns and flashlights. So when Talia screams, they're on the scene in a matter of, 20 seconds. They're there with their flashlights, and I talked to these guys. And they saw exactly what Talia described. After she screamed, she said that the Peruvian face peeler started to take off on his hoverboard, and he yelled back to the gringo, let's go, we got to get out of here. And the gringo said, no, we can't just leave her here. And according to Talia, he grabbed her by the hair and started to drag her up this hill in this gully. And this is, when the neighbors got on the scene, this is what they saw. They saw Talia laying there, bloodied up, and these two guys, these dressed in black armored bodysuits, were like hovering on their boards between the trees, hovering on their circular platforms between the trees. They maneuvered to where there was an opening in the trees, and they shot up in the air.
Jeez.
And they all saw it. All these neighbors saw it. They had their flashlights on, these guys. So, and Talia said that these guys, when they snap into these boards, into these circular platforms that they fly on, and then there's something on their boots that they activate to energize the platforms. So there's nothing about jetpacks. So this is something else, and again, very advanced.
Why was she out there at night? I mean, these men are sitting out there with their shotguns because they're.
Let me pause it there. She wasn't out there at night. It was at night, but what they were saying was that she was in her yard just picking stuff to make a drink for the evening, for the dinner meal. So she's looking for fruit, and that's what happened with her. Let me see real quick if there's anything else that's important in that.
On these circular hoverboards. And again, there's no noise. The only time that there's noise reported is when the hoverboards are in a stationary position and they take off. They say, the villagers describe sort of like a compressed air sound, some sort of a whooshing when they initially take off. But as they're hovering above the village on these things, they're silent. They're completely silent.
Okay, let me pause that there. Like I said, I don't want to make this too long. And I apologize, you guys, if it's too long, but you know you're here for this kind of information. So, let's talk about the UAP jellyfish with Jeremy Corbell and George Nash. This is the original video, but then there's part 2. So where are these things coming from? That thing is just floating along, man. Let me time skip.
It didn't document the whole thing.
And this is part 2.
With how we're seeing it. So this is the same object. Let's play the second video.
They say that this object went into the water, the same object, transmedium capabilities where it can go through any, like I said in the last video, any of the 3 dimensions, whether it be solid, gas, or liquid form. They're able to go through it without any disruption in their movement, without taking any damage or any kind of disruption in their physical form, if you want to say that. And they say this goes into the water. This is Weaponized, episode 47. Like I said, you guys check it out. Our technology